Guys, we have to talk about REVV Amplification's new amp. It's a little amp.
It's a little amp.
Today, we are gonna check out the brand new REVV Generator 50.
Let's do it.
Alright guys, hope you're doing great out there today. If this is your first time here at my channel, my name is Kyle, and what I do is I take all sorts of awesome, high gain related guitar equipment, I record it with a simple SM57 setup, and I give you the unprocessed audio on your end. Wow! So if you're into E-standard thrash riffs, drop C hardcore riffs, and dudes that are constantly forgetting to text people back, you're in the right place. Consider hitting the like button and subscribing on the way out so you don't miss any more of my stuff. Thanks! Alright guys, so today is a very exciting day in the high gain amp world. And that is because the folks over at REVV Amplification have taken their flagship amplifier, the REVV 120 Mark III, and the astronomical amount of features that are packed into that amplifier, and they have shrunk all of that down into this 50-watt box that you see sitting here next to me. This is the all-new REVV Generator 50, and it's a spicy little nugget. Before we get too far into this video, in the sake of full transparency, I do want you to know that while I'm not being paid for this video, REVV did custom make this amplifier for me and send it to me in order to share with you guys here on the channel. So I will be keeping this amp, this is my amp, and it's essentially the payment for sharing it with you guys in this video here. So feel free to take everything that I have to say with a big old grain of salt. You are absolutely more than fair to do so, but just know I'm gonna give you my honest thoughts and opinions, as I always do. Keep that in mind, why don't ya? All right guys, so as far as this amplifier goes, it is every bit of the all-tube monstrosity that the Generator Mark III 120 is, and it has all of those same features, including the MIDI functionality. It has the 2 notes capability, so you can record this amp silently without needing an additional load box. That load box is built into this amplifier. It's got the headphone jack on the front. It has the Bluetooth functionality in order to control the 2-note stuff. It has a built-in gate that is global on the amplifier. It has built-in reverb. It has 3 different channels with different modes within those channels. It has the ability to store your presets right here on the front of the amp. It's got multiple foot switchable master volumes, presence, depth, different voicing switches for channel 3, which is where we will be living on this demo for the most part. It even has a spot inside where you can cook your steak while you're riffing. I made that part up, but I wouldn't put it past them at some point in the near future. The only main difference between this and the larger amplifier, other than it's smaller and it has a 50-watt all 6L6 power section, is that there is not a 4th channel on this. On the REVV Generator Mark III 120, there are 2 different gain channels. There's your purple and there's your red. On this one, there is just 1 channel, and from what I can tell, it's almost like a combination of both of those, because on the 120, the purple is kind of like your really grindy, very tight, aggressive, modern, mid-forward sounding overdrive, and the red channel is kind of like your rectifier Uberschall. It's kind of like your thick, your flumpy, bumpy, big booty, high gain sound. So this really kind of seems to be a perfect in-between of both of those, because you can get the low end, you can get the tightness, you can get the modern mid-grind out of it if you want to. And if I'm gonna be 100% honest, I haven't compared this back-to-back with my REVV Generator 120 Mark III. I don't know why I insist on on saying the entire name every time I talk about it. We'll just call it the 120. But I'm really just kind of gathering that that channel 3 is a little bit of an in-between. But guess what? We don't have to guess. We don't have to imagine the differences because I'm gonna compare them later in this video. And on top of that, I'm also going to put this amp through a different cabinet towards the end of the video than the Mesa that I use for all of my amp demos. And there is a reason for that, which I will get into a little bit later, but we've got a lot of ground to cover. I wanna try to put a bunch of different guitars, different tunings and everything through this, different overdrives, so that you guys can really get an idea of what this amp is capable of. So let's go ahead and do that. For that intro clip, I was playing my Gallagher Typhon with a Duncan distortion in the bridge. We were boosting the front end of channel 3 with a Pepper's Dirty Tree overdrive. That is an amazing overdrive with this amp, I can tell you already. But we are going into, again, my 1999 Mesa Traditional cab, stock vintage 30s in the cab, SM57 on that V30, no post-processing on any of the audio that you guys will hear in this video. So just to remind you of that intro tone before we go diving in a little bit deeper, this is what we had. So awesome, modern, tight and chunky, yet still full and thick modern high gain tone. I said modern at least 3 times in there because it's modern. So let's go ahead, let's kick off that Dirty Tree. I'm gonna go ahead and jump over to channel 2 to check out the lower gain tones real quick, just to show you what it can do. I don't care about those tones. You probably don't care about those tones if you're not a pathetic loser, but we're gonna check that out real quick before we move back into the high gain stuff. All right, guys, so remember how I said that you can basically store your presets of each individual channel right here on the front of the amplifier? Well, I have done that. All I had to do was switch over to channel 2, and here is a tone that I actually dialed in a little earlier while I was checking the amp out. So as you can see, we got a little reverb there. That is just a nice crunchy tone for the mid to low gain stuff. And the drive here, this is a 3-way drive. So even though that light is illuminated, that doesn't mean that there's like a drive on. Rev has this kind of aggression system that they build into their high gain tones for the most part, where there are 3 different aggression voices. So with this LED off, you're in the standard mode. If you hit it, you go into the blue mode, which is a little bit more fat and full than the standard mode. And then finally, the red mode is more of a tighter, compressed voicing. These differences are somewhat subtle, especially if you're not here in the room, so keep that in mind, but they do alter not only the sound, but the feel of the amplifier a little bit. So if you can't get what you want just switching over to that channel, try playing around with those drive or aggression modes in order to kind of fine tune it to your liking. So I turned the reverb off, and we are going to turn that drive back to regular. And also, I forgot to mention, I switched guitars to my Epiphone Les Paul Custom here because this has Gibson custom humbucker pickups in it. These are a really, really nice sounding PAF, a lower output pickup. So as you can see, not a whole lot of gain in that standard drive mode. So here is the blue drive mode. Still not a lot of drive in the blue mode, but it smooths it out a little bit. It fattens out that EQ. Finally, the red mode. Let's hit it with an overdrive real quick. Here is a Boss SD1. And that actually does kind of push it into a more aggressive voicing. We could probably crank that gain up a little bit and see how far we can get on this channel before we move on. This does do the crunchy thing really, really well in my opinion, and I'm a fan of this channel. But on to the good stuff. All right, guys, so we are back over to the channel 3, and everything that I said about that aggression system obviously is applicable here. We have this little red light under the aggression label, and that tells you what mode you're on. So we have been on the red mode the entire time that we've been hearing this. Let's go ahead, let's press that channel 3 button again, and this puts us into that standard mode. And as you can tell, it is definitely more subdued. There's not as much gain, there's not as much compression. Let's hit it again, and this will put us into the blue aggression mode. So as you can hear, fattens it out, smooths it out on top, just like it did on channel 2, but it is now being applied to the high gain channel. And again, if you have a preset that you're really liking, you can just hit that store button and it'll store not only your settings, but it'll store that aggression mode too. So cool beans. This amp has a ton of gain on tap, but unless you're using an insane boost like that dirty tree that we used in the beginning of the video, you're gonna need to push it up a little bit to get into that really saturated territory. And now we are starting to get some more aggression going on, but we're still in that blue mode, and it sounds a little tubby and a little nasally for my opinion, in my opinion, something. Words are hard. So let's go over to that red mode. I still think that we need a little bit more gain, and we want to tighten that up a little bit more. So we have a couple of switches here on this channel. I have the bright switch engaged, which is obviously going to bring out some higher end frequencies, but if we hit that cut switch, this amp is not super tight. Like, it really does have a big low mid hump. That is something I've noticed across the board. I've owned a bunch of different Rev amplifiers and they all kind of have that. Finally, there is a fat switch. Let's go ahead and let's kick that in just so you guys can see how much of a difference it makes. It makes things fat. So again, if you want to continue to get a thicker sound out of this amplifier, it's basically like go to blue mode on the aggression, remove the cut, remove the bright, kick the fat switch in. And it is super fat, super thick. Not the tone that I go for at all because I like good tones. But if you are trying to basically get that like stoner rock or that fuzzy or doomy type of tone, you can actually get this even though this is a very modern voice and featured amplifier. I really started falling apart at the end of that sentence. So let's go ahead, let's kick off that fat switch and let's go basically back to vanilla amplifier, meaning that no aggression is on, none of the voicing switches are on. That's how it sounds. As you guys can hear in between the amplifier being played and me talking forever, there is no noise whatsoever. And yes, I am using a noise gate out front because I always have one on my boost board, but if I were to turn that off, still no noise. And that is because the built-in gate in this amplifier is excellent. If you guys have ever used the REVV G8 pedal, you know that Rev makes a quality gate. So they have basically applied that technology to their amplifiers. And a nice thing about it is the gate on this is not on the front end, but it's between the preamp and the power amp section. So any of that preamp hiss that you're getting, especially once you kick in overdrives and stuff that you're used to from like 5150s or rectifiers, not gonna get that here because the gate in between the preamp and the power section is going to cut out all that noise, and it's very, very accurate. And if you want to adjust the sensitivity of it, there is a control on the back of this, so you get full control over it. So with that being said, let's get away from these weak PAF pickups and let's get something a little bit more high output. All right, guys, so we are back on my Duncan distortion pickup. We still have nothing in front of the amp and none of the switches engaged. Oh yeah, that is really, really thick. So let's go ahead, let's kick on the bright switch, kick in the cut. We're gonna try to dial in one more tone without a boost before we start boosting this thing. I've rolled the bass back and engaged the cut bright switches, and we are on the red aggression setting. It is really, really low mid heavy for my personal taste. It makes it sound a little bit too round. So we're gonna go ahead and kick in an MXR M77 overdrive. Definitely dig it. Let's try a more scooped out tone and let's see if we can get something a little bit more 80s sounding. That is with the Duncan distortion. Let's grab something with active pickups and see how it reacts to active pickups. All right, guys, so I have my Ibanez Axion label here with the Fishman Fluence Modern Ceramic in the bridge. Let's turn off the overdrive and let's hear going straight into the amplifier. All right, so as you can hear, it is a little bit tighter than the passive pickups that we tried, but overall, this amp just has, like I said, a really thick low mid thing going on in channel 3 in the high gain tone. And I think if you're looking for a super tight amp on its own that doesn't require a boost, like if you're expecting the purple channel of the Generator 120, you're not gonna get it here. This amp doesn't really tighten up super well without an overdrive, even with tight pickups. So keep that in mind. For me, that is an absolute bonus because I like shaping the front end of my amplifier with overdrives and EQs and stuff like that. But if you're a straight into the amp guy who wants that tight, compressed, saturated tone, you're probably not gonna get it here. Let's move into drop C hardcore territory. All right, guys, Gibson Les Paul Studio Faded, and I have the Duncan Jupiter pickups in this guitar. These are very tight, very clear pickups, but they also don't saturate a lot, so keep that in mind when you hear this tone. so as you can hear, no overdrive on out in front. This thing actually does really, really well for the drop C hardcore type thing. But of course, we gotta try it with an overdrive because we're belligerent amateurs, for God's sakes. So kicking that MXR M77 back in, I'm gonna roll the gain back a little bit. This amp officially for me has just become a designated drop tune amplifier because that sounded absolutely nasty. I really, really like that. Last but not least, 7-string, and then we'll move on to the comparison and the other cabinet. All right, guys, Schecter PT hybrid here with the EMG 57 in the bridge. We have no overdrive. All right, so with no overdrive, it does sound a little bit rubbery in the low end and not quite as saturated as I would like. So let's go ahead, let's kick in that M77 one more time. That may be the best tone that I have gotten out of this amp so far. That sounded absolutely nasty. I'm having fun. Are you having fun? Let's go ahead. Let's switch out that cabinet. Let's get the 120 Mark III over here, do a quick comparison, show you the differences between this cab and that cab, because this cab has too much bark for this amp in my opinion, and you're gonna see the different cab's gonna make a big difference. I'm gonna shut up, let's just do it. All right guys, so I have swapped the cab out. The cab that I have chosen for this portion of the video is my Randall 412 XL 16 ohm V30s in this cabinet, and overall this cab just has a brighter top end and way less of a mid bark to it, and I really feel like it suits this amp so much better than the Mesa. So here's how it sounds. So like I said, massive difference between this cab. It sounds super, super good. So what I want to do last thing in the video for you guys real quick is I have a tone dialed in with the Rev I'm pretty happy with, maybe a little bit more gain. So I am going to set up both channel 3 and channel 4 on my Generator 120 here. I'm gonna play a riff on the 50 and then I'm gonna go straight to channel 3 and straight to channel 4 with no talking in between so you guys can hear how they sound, how they differentiate. right, guys, so as you can hear, there are some definite differences between the 120 and the 50. As I quickly dialed them in back to back to back here, I can hear a lot of similarities and I can also hear a lot of differences, but I overall think that Rev did a really good job of getting the sound and everything that's really great about the 120 into the 50 watt model. And this thing only weighs, I believe that the spec sheet said that it was like in the 30-some pound range, so it's not super heavy. It looks, I mean, it's basically the same look as the 120, but in a more portable, compact, and affordable package. Because the Generator 50 comes in at $2,100 new. So if you guys think that you would like to either get one of these on order if you want to customize it, or buy one of the stocked ones, I will leave a link down below to Sweetwater. That is an affiliate link, so if you pick up one of these bad boys, not only do you get yourself a sick amp, you help the folks over at Rev, but you get the amazing service from Sweetwater, and I make a couple bucks, so everybody wins. And that's gonna be it for me today, guys. What did you think about the new REVV Generator 50? Is this an amplifier that you could see adding to your collection? Is the form factor or the price something that now puts a Rev into your wheelhouse where maybe the 120 didn't quite fit your needs before? Really curious to see what you guys have to say about this thing, and ultimately I want to know what you guys thought about the tones that I got out of this. I'm gonna get out of here, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Kyle here again. We'll see you next time.
You know what this wall is missing? Another amp. There we go.